So today what I want to talk about is the fact that just because your gun worked today and it's worked fine for the last 30 years and you fired 10,000 rounds through it, which is not likely, that your gun may not work tomorrow. And that's why you always need a spare gun. And a lot of times on the internet I see people say you don't need a backup weapon. In my experience, that's just foolishness. I would say you always need a backup weapon. So what I would say is, if your safety or the game you're trying to get is important enough that you're carrying a weapon, then you should carry two weapons. So I would always carry a backup gun, especially a handgun, because over the years I've worked on a tremendous amount of guns that have broken and have malfunctioned. And some of them have really high round counts, and the people were very confident of how well that gun would work and how reliable it was, and it never failed them in the past, and then one day it just didn't work. Now, this can be ammunition related, and it can also be user related, where you didn't care for the weapon properly. But in a lot of instances, many commercial guns are not designed for a long lifespan. Many hunting guns are not designed for a long lifespan. They're also not designed to shoot a lot of rounds in succession. So for instance, if you take a shotgun and on one day you fire 3,000 rounds through it, there's a high probability you would destroy that gun because the stresses and the heat builds up in it, and it's not designed for that. But if you use that same hunting shotgun for 25 years and you fire 10,000 rounds through it, 20 or 30 at a time, it would last that long in most cases. So the rate of fire, the amount of ammunition fired in each encounter, has a big factor in whether guns break and how long they last. What I do is I have a stockpile, and I have a large inventory for my business. And the stuff that I've set aside for me to use, what I do is I'll pull that stuff out, and one of my nephews and I will fire that stuff as both training practice and to identify issues with the weapons. And I've had guns with high round counts. I have several guns that I've put 25 to 30,000 rounds through in the last 50 years. And those guns were designed for a high round count, but it's rare for them to reach numbers like that. And periodically I would go through and replace parts in anticipation of failure in the future, and that way you don't encounter problems with the weapon. Now, we took these 5 guns out to shoot them. Of these guns, 3 of the 5 malfunctioned, and they were malfunctions that you're not going to fix in the field. The Mark 18 at the top, I fired thousands of rounds through that, and we usually shoot between 80 and 300 rounds when we go out with that gun, and it has an ejector issue. First time that's popped up, and I will go through in depth the problem that these guns had. And so you can see the warning signs and the fact that you can't fix this in the field. The second gun there, the 18-inch gun, that one worked fine, no issues. The next one down, the Winchester 1200 with the mag extension, that one functions fine, but for some reason with the ammunition we were using and the choke tube in it, from 0 to 20 yards, we were getting a lot of deflection from the aim point. If you were firing over 30 yards, it kind of rounded out, and it didn't really show up as being, throwing the shot pattern off. The bottom one is a Savage Stevens, and that one's 12 gauge, and that particular gun has a broken extractor. Now the interesting thing is on the Stevens design, you have a left-hand extractor and a right-hand extractor. And they both have to be functional for the gun to be reliable and to extract shells. So in that case, that gun would fire and shoot shells, it just wouldn't extract them. So in a survival situation, you could continue firing, but you'd have to use a cleaning rod to eject your brass till you could fix the weapon. Now the last one is a Taurus Model 66 revolver, 357 mag, and that one the timing is off. So with revolvers you can have timing that's too fast or too slow. The most common is too slow. This one happens to be too fast, and I'll show you why. But when a revolver is timed too fast, it will destroy the cylinder. It'll chew it up. If it's too slow, then the cylinders don't align properly with the barrel and you'll shave lead when the bullet goes through. So we'll take a look at some of this stuff up close so you can get an idea of what's happening. So we'll start with this Taurus revolver. And what I'll show you is this gun, the timing is too fast. And you can see here the locking bolt is destroying the recesses on the cylinder. And you can see on this one, you can see the rough marks on the edge as it goes around. And the reason you know that it's the timing and not the locking bolt being rough is the fact it's doing it to all of them. Now, in some cases, if you had only one cylinder that was a problem, these surfaces the hand pushes on, one of those could be off. But what would happen is you'd only have one or two chambers that actually malfunctioned. In this one, all of them are. So when you're cocking the gun, you cock it real slow. And you can see how it's hanging. You see those cylinders aren't too bad. But when you get around to this side, you can see how it's starting to hang up. You can see right there, the hammer won't go any further back. You have to actually push it pretty hard. So the locking bolt is forcing itself up into here. Now, when you're looking down in here, this is your locking bolt right here. And sometimes the edges of that can be rough and scar your cylinder up. When I used to do revolver action jobs, I would polish the edges of this locking bolts. And that would keep you from ringing the cylinder. But in this case, you can see how the notch is being cut out. If you continued to fire this revolver in this condition, it would destroy the cylinder and you'd actually need a new cylinder. Now, so this little piece of metal is the hand, and that's what causes the cylinder to move. So what we'll do is look at this hand, and you see how it moves up? This piece pushes your cylinder up. So what's happening is we need to take just a little bit off of the nose of this so the cylinder slows down a little bit and the bolt doesn't lock up so fast. But with revolvers, if your timing's off, either fast or slow, it'll destroy the revolver. So that's something you have to fix. And what I would do is tell you that I would say 80% of revolvers in circulation, their timing is off. But it's not to such an extent that it damages the gun. It just creates problems with shaving of lead. So most of the revolvers I've seen, slow timing was the issue, where the cylinder didn't come all the way around and line up with the barrel, versus fast timing like this gun has. Now this Mark 18, the problem we're having it is failure to eject and also failure to feed. And what's happening is this ejector is bad. If you look at it close, you can see that it's wearing on this side, but there's no wear over here near the side of the bolt. And what I normally do is I go ahead and change the extractor and extractor spring if I do the ejector and ejector spring. So I'll go ahead and change those. So when your round is in the gun, your ejector should be pushed back. So when it feeds, it picks cartridge up, it goes under the extractor and pushes the ejector down, and it should be smooth. So this one, you can see and hear it's catching. So that's telling me this is a bad part. So we'll switch that out. It probably just didn't have the proper heat treating. This one's probably had about 5,000 rounds through it. So we'll go ahead and replace that and put us a new extractor and an ejector in it. The next one we're going to show you is this Stevens. And what I'll do is advance the bolt a little bit. So when you're looking inside of this Savage Stevens, all of these 67s and 69s and 79s, they all have two extractors. So the left hand one is broken on this. You can see a straight piece of metal, but it has no hook. The right hand one, which is the closest to the screen, is intact and there's no issue. But these parts haven't been made in years, but they are available from Numeric Parts Company. And then the other gun we were having an issue with was this one. And I believe it's a choke tube issue. So sometimes these choke tubes don't wear evenly, or they can be defective. So this particular choke tube doesn't like the ammunition we were using. So I think it's really an incompatibility problem. So what we'll do, since I have a lot of that ammunition, we'll switch out choke tubes and find something that works pretty good. So in summary, you should work with all of your weapons and test fire them, because even though they're maintained and they work today, they may not work tomorrow. And you should go ahead and identify issues and get proper spare parts. And from experience over the years, you'll learn what to keep in stock. So please share your thoughts. We'll see you on the next video.